of Power, live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Julie Fine in Washington. Tonight, NATO's leader heads to Washington.
I have total confidence in President Trump, and he is the only one who can get this done. He is the leader of the most powerful nation on earth.
With fears the president could give Vladimir Putin what he wants in Ukraine, Mark Rutte rushes to meet leaders on the Hill and President Trump at the White House. That meeting between the two leaders about to begin as Trump denies reports now the U.S. has lifted a key restriction on use of long-range missiles for Ukraine, while Treasury Secretary Bessent teases an announcement on Russian sanctions as soon as today, potentially shifting the direction of the war. We'll discuss it all.
Plus, reporting tonight that Republican senators are discussing unleashing a nuclear option to bypass Democrats, why the filibuster could soon be in danger. When we speak to Republican Senator Ron Johnson and get reaction from Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto up ahead.
Also this evening, Tesla's earnings out just in the last hour, why the stock is heading lower after hours, and what it means for Elon Musk's potential $1 trillion pay package.
And on the eve of the president's visit to the APEC Summit, we speak with South Korean Ambassador Kang Kyung-wha as the expectations for the summit and her pledge to strengthen the U.S.-South Korea alliance.
So we begin with the White House this evening following a meeting between NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the president. That meeting is actually just about to begin here after several developments in the fight to end the war in Ukraine. Let's go back to Thursday when the president spoke with Vladimir Putin for 2 hours, announcing a second meeting, this time in Hungary, as a follow-up to their Alaska summit. Then, the day later, a tense sit-down with Ukrainian President Zelensky, the president dismissing requests at the time to provide Ukraine with long-range missiles. And then yesterday, a sudden reversal from Trump. No more Putin meeting in the coming weeks. Which leads us to today, with NATO Secretary Rutte visiting the White House and a report the administration is lifting a key restriction on Ukraine's use of some long-range missiles in its fight against Russia. By the way, a report the president is now denying on social media, even as Treasury Secretary Bessent again teases an increase in Russian sanctions as soon as today. Take a listen.
We are going to either announce after the close this afternoon or first thing first thing tomorrow morning, a substantial pickup in Russia's sanctions.
We have details, none beyond that, as we bring in Bloomberg's Laura Davison here with more in Washington. Do we know what this uptick in sanctions refers to? Is this the secondary sanctions package that's already been crafted in the Senate?
This is actually a separate sanctions on Russian oil companies. The Treasury Department just announced moments ago there's kind of some second-tier gas companies, and the statement from the Treasury Department said that more could be coming. This is clearly a ratcheting up from the White House, headed into what could be a very tense moment here.
And to echo on what Joe just talked about on the missiles in Ukraine, you have this, then you have the Russia sanctions. What does this really mean for the meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin that the president really seemed to downplay yesterday?
It means that Rutte's visit here seems to be working in terms of getting what he wants, of kind of keeping Trump with the NATO alliance and ratcheting up the pressure on Russia in the defense against Ukraine. You've seen the president really vacillate here on whether he was going to meet with Putin, not meet with Putin. So Rutte is really trying to continue that message. We saw that on the Hill, and that's the message I expect he'll deliver in the Oval Office in just a few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to have an ear and an eye on that meeting, of course. It follows this post from President Trump on Truth Social just about a half hour ago. He writes, the Wall Street Journal story on the USA's approval of Ukraine being allowed to use long-range missiles deep into Russia is fake news. The U.S. has nothing to do with those missiles, he writes, wherever they may come from or what Ukraine does with them. Do we read this in a literal sense here, that it's fake news, or is it the way that this is being framed in this report?
This is a little bit of a non-denial denial here, and it could be that the president is not quite ready to announce this, and that's why he's denouncing this specific report from the Wall Street Journal. He's been very cautious about this long-range missile question. Remember back to last week when Zelensky was at the White House, was asking for the use of those Tomahawk missiles. Trump said, it was kind of danced around this issue, saying, I hope they never have to be used. But this has been sort of a key point in the war where you have Ukraine and Zelensky saying, look, we need some of these weapons, we need these restrictions lifted. Where Trump doesn't want to go that far because he's worried it will damage his relationship with Putin.
Fascinating moment here. Bloomberg's Laura Davison, we thank you. And for fresh reaction Amid these reports this evening on a potential workaround to end the government shutdown, we're joined now by Republican Senator of Wisconsin, Ron Johnson. He's with us live from Capitol Hill. And Senator, it's great to have you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on the shutdown here, but I'd love to ask you about this news that's coming from the White House now and whether the moment has arrived for secondary sanctions to hit the floor. I know that John Thune has said they're on pause right now out of deference to the White House, but is it time to vote?
Well, again, I really will let that up to the president. When he wants that as a backstop to put pressure on Putin, I think that's when we'll act.
Understood. Is that something that you feel like we're moving closer to as he prepares to sit down with the Secretary General at NATO? We're just trying to get a sense of which direction the president's leaning in here and how to deal with Vladimir Putin.
Well, my guess is getting pretty disgusted with dealing with Vladimir Putin. He's giving him every opportunity to end up with a peaceful solution here, dangled economic benefits in front of him, obviously threatened sanctions. Again, this president wants peace. I think if there's a hallmark to his administration, even his previous administration, he's not a wartime president. He wants peace. Now, he'll use and achieve peace through strength, but in the end, he wants peace, and he's doggedly pursuing it.
And you may have heard Joe just go to Truth Social post from the president. He just shot down a Wall Street Journal report that the U.S. is allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles in Ukraine. How will that play into what is supposed to be a meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin, which is now looking much less likely?
Yeah, I think that meeting is canceled because Vladimir Putin keeps lobbing missiles, more than lobbing, launching missiles into Ukraine. Apparently hit a kindergarten earlier today. Again, Vladimir Putin's a war criminal. There's no reason for him to invade Ukraine. The fact of the matter is he's not going to lose this war, though. You've got to recognize that reality. The only way this war ends is through a negotiated settlement. We're not going to like the terms of that, but even worse, the bloody stalemate that we're in right now, where we're losing thousands of people on both sides a week, it's just untenable.
I want to ask you about what's happening with the shutdown here, Senator. I spoke earlier with the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, who kind of stopped us in our tracks when he suggested that he might be behind a full year CR. In fact, one that would get us through December of 2026. I want you to hear what he said earlier on Bloomberg. Let's listen.
December 21st, 2026 is what I've been hearing up here as a suggestion, as an opportunity of a continuing resolution. As we know, we're operating under a year-long resolution from last year. We're looking at what was appropriated when Biden was president.
That was Congressman Jason Smith earlier on Bloomberg. Senator, is this what it's come to? And would you support a full year continuing resolution?
What would be a much better idea would be just pass my Eliminate Shutdowns Act. What that does, it sets up automatic rolling 14-day continuing appropriations for whatever department or all of government that hasn't been appropriated for. That would give the appropriators time to find areas of agreement, pass the bills they can pass. The ones that don't, you just continue to fund at last year's levels. That'd be a far more common sense approach than a one-year continuing resolution for all of government. Give the appropriators time. You know, the appropriators, some of the Republicans even voted against the Eliminate Shutdown Act. They said it would undermine the appropriations process. Well, here's the alternative, a CR that goes into December of 2026. So hopefully people will, come to their senses and realize Eliminate Shutdowns Act is the solution to our current fix.
Senator, it doesn't seem that that bill has gone very far yet. Are you sensing you will get some more support for this?
Well, the good news is Leader Thune switched his vote to no so he can bring it for reconsideration. Again, I was very disappointed in Republican appropriators voting no. They said it would undercut the appropriation process, but let me describe that appropriation process it supposedly undermines. I've been here 15 years. That means we should have passed 180 appropriation bills before the start of the fiscal year you're funding. We've passed 6. So this vaunted appropriation process, which is clearly broken, fails 96.7% of the time. The Eliminate Shutdown Act does not undermine that process. It just gives us all the time. We wouldn't be sitting here for the fourth week, going into the fourth week of a shutdown, doing nothing. we could have been on appropriation bills. We could have been working with each other. We could have been negotiating, but instead, we've got this shutdown showdown with literally no end in sight. Hopefully tomorrow, but hopefully today, the Democrats actually vote for the continuing resolution. Doesn't sound like they will. The next best step is let's at least pay the federal workers we're forcing to work. That's the Shutdown Fairness Act that I've offered that we'll be voting on tomorrow.
I want to ask you about that. I know you're reintroducing this. To your point, there's a vote tomorrow. Do you worry that this makes shutdowns easier, that it removes a pain point that might actually compel lawmakers to end this saga?
Clearly, the current system is utterly broken right now. We just crossed $38 trillion in debt. Again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So again, we're in this dysfunction. Let's not make federal workers who are being forced to pay for our dysfunction. So again, this makes perfect sense. Even the National Active and Retired Federal Employees Association, generally not an association that would agree with the Republican bill, completely supports this piece of legislation. So at a minimum, we ought to pass the Shutdown Fairness Act and pay the people we are forcing to work: military, federal law enforcement, air traffic control, people who write our Social Security checks. These people deserve their paycheck. They're working. By the way, they're going to get paid anyway. We have a law that's going to provide back pay, so pay them in time so they don't have to go to food banks. They don't have to drive DoorDash to pay for their daughter's tuition. We're hearing stories that that's what federal employees are being forced to do. That's unconscionable.
You mentioned debt and you mentioned Argentina. Are you concerned the attention to that is making problems with Wisconsin farmers when you're dealing with a shutdown?
I don't remember mentioning Argentina. Maybe I wasn't articulating something. Listen, we've got a problem right now from a standpoint the government is shut down. Things aren't moving forward. There's a common sense solution here: either just pass the continuing appropriation or the Eliminate Shutdown Act. Simple solutions, common sense. I think the vast majority of Americans would agree with that. Right now, we're being held hostage by, quite honestly, the uniparty appropriators. This seems dysfunctional. It is dysfunctional. This is a very well-honed process. I've seen it time and time again. I've been here 15 years. You use these shutdowns to back us up against a deadline like Thanksgiving or Christmas, drop a multi-thousand-page appropriation bill on our desk, say, Senator, take it or leave it, or you're not going to see Christmas. That has to end. Yeah.
We appreciate it, Senator, and we appreciate your time, Senator Ron Johnson, as we now want to bring you to the White House for a meeting that the president is holding with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte. This is live on Bloomberg TV and radio.
When it comes to Ukraine, basically the weapons from the U.S. being delivered to Ukraine, paid for by allies, and the Europeans coming together to discuss how can we sustain Ukraine post the peace deal. All of this is evidence of your leadership of pushing the Europeans and the Canadians to do more, to deliver, and to equalize in spending with the U.S. So on all of this, and today we will talk more on how we can really bring Ukraine to the next phase and get this terrible war, and all the bloodshed ended.
And as you know, we are going to be making a big trip next week. Some of you are going with us. We'll be going to Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan. In South Korea, I'll be meeting with President Xi of China. We'll have a pretty long meeting scheduled. We can work out a lot of our questions and our doubts and our tremendous assets together. So we look forward to that. I think something will work out. We have a very good relationship, but that'll be a big one. We canceled the meeting with President Putin. It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like we were going to get to the place we have to get, so I canceled it. But we'll do it in the future. But next week we'll be with many of you in those locations that I told you. Then it's back to Washington. So thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, can you tell us a little bit about why you're elevating sanctions against Russia right now?
I just felt it was time. We've waited a long time. I thought that we'd go long before the Middle East. And Mark, as you know, we did the Middle East +7. So we did 7 different wars from Pakistan and India to so many.
Azerbaijan, Armenia,
which they said was impossible to do. All these wars I did, and the one that we have left, we have one left. It'll be 9. We have one left, and I think we'll get that done too. I think we're on our way to getting it done.
We have to.
Please.
Mr. President. do you have a timeline for when you think this war is going to be over because of your leadership?
No, I don't have a timeline. You can't have in war, it's hard to have a timeline. You know, so many things happen in war. Go ahead.
What about Tomahawk missiles? Putin is definitely
Well,
afraid.
the problem with the Tomahawk that a lot of people don't know, it'll take a minimum of 6 months, usually a year, to learn how to use them. They're highly complex. So the only way a Tomahawk is going to be shot is if we shot it, and we're not going to do that. But there is a tremendous learning curve with the Tomahawk. It's a very powerful weapon, very accurate weapon, and maybe that's what makes it so complex. But it will take a year. It takes a year of intense training to learn how to use it. And we know how to use it, and we're not going to be teaching other people. It's too far out into the future.
President Trump speaking live in the Oval Office with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte. This is a conversation that will probably go on for some time, and we'll keep tabs on that for you here on Bloomberg. We'll have much more straight ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew. With the federal shutdown now becoming the second longest in U.S. history, signs today it could become the longest one ever, with both parties still far apart and far away from a deal.
But there are lawmakers who are reaching across the aisle, among them New Mexico Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. We spoke with Senator Cortez Masto earlier today, and we asked her about the yay vote and where the shutdown goes from here. Here's that conversation.
Well, I can tell you just in general, there's a group of us Democrats and Republicans trying to come together and help get through this impasse. There's an impasse right now. We need to open up the government, and we need to extend the health care subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. I think there's the ability to do both. And those are the conversations that are taking place with some of us right now, both R's and D's.
Well, depending on who you talk to right now, Senator, and I'm sure you know this all too well, you are either a profile in courage or you're a problem for your party. And I'm wondering what the conversations are like in the cloakroom. Are you trying to get other Democrats to join you? And are you surprised that hasn't happened yet? I think it's 12 rounds today, right?
Well, I can say this. We're all aligned in the sense that we're fighting for Americans, right? We're fighting for this country. We're fighting for health care. We're taking on what we see are the bad policies of this administration. And it is not just unique to Democrats. I can tell you right now, there were some of my Republican colleagues that want to address the Affordable Care Act and address the health care subsidies, the tax credit. They need to. Because in their states, Americans will be harmed if we do not extend these health care subsidies. And that is true across the country. I don't care whether you're blue state, red state, purple state. It's about Americans and supporting them and helping them lower their health care costs. This is one way we can do it. And that's why both Democrats and there are some Republicans who want to extend this health care subsidy. And they should. Because if we don't, there's probably about 22 million Americans across the country that are not only going to see their health care costs go up, some of them are going to lose access to health care because they can't afford it.
Senator, you said that you believe that you can reopen the government and extend the subsidies. I'm curious, in your conversations with the other senators, do you have some guarantees from Republicans that they will vote in favor of it?
Well, those are the conversations and negotiations now, because clearly we have to do both. And I will tell you a key part of this conversation is going to be the man in the White House, Donald Trump. Because the leadership of Republicans in the Republican Party in Congress, they're only going to do what he says. So they have to be a part of this conversation. And Donald Trump has to be a part of this conversation. He can't be flying around everywhere. He needs to be here in Washington, bringing the parties together, being a constructive part of addressing the health care costs that we have in this country. If he were to engage, that would help us move through this impasse of opening up the government and addressing the Affordable Care Act subsidies so that we do not see health care insurance premiums increase for families. I can't stress this enough, and it's just not unique to Nevada. I know my family's in Nevada, a family of four. If you're making $56,000 a year, you're going to see your health care premium go up by at least $200. That's crazy. There's going to be a double-digit increase for premiums for people, and they are not going to be able to afford it. That means we're going to lose people on health care. And the only time now we will see them if they have an acute crisis and they're going to show up in emergency rooms. It's going to have a ripple effect for everybody's health care coverage in this country, and it's going to have an impact on all of our hospitals and our clinics, including in our urban and rural areas. So we really need to come together to address this issue in this country, and that requires all of us talking and get beyond this impasse and start addressing and solving the problems of the American public. This is what they want us to do.
The continuing resolution that you've been voting for, Senator, only runs through the 21st of November. So there's been a question about whether that date needs to change. There's also a question about whether this could be extended by a much greater length of time. John Thune suggested just 24 hours ago that a full year CR might be the only way out of this. The White House has suggested it, and we spoke earlier today with the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman Jason Smith told us he would support such a move. So you're not facing potential shutdowns every couple of months here. How about you? Through December 2026, would you vote for that?
Well, let me just say this. This is part of the problem. Instead of coming to talk, leadership talking amongst each other, Democrats and Republicans, and all of us working together like we normally should, we're hearing conversations from the press and offers coming from the press. No offense to both of you, but this is where this should happen, right here in Washington, and us coming to the table, having these conversations. That's part of the impasse, and this is my frustration and some of my colleagues, and we see the same frustration. Republican leadership, Democratic leadership, the White House, we need to all be in the same room. We need to be working like the American public expects us to do in Congress and do our jobs.
Senator, though, you are not all in the same room. So what do you believe could be the turning point here?
I think it starts with the conversations around things that you've just said. We all obviously need to open up the government. We have to address an appropriations bills and still pass those. We're going to need time to get those done. And we have to fix the Affordable Care Act. All of those things are on the table. It's not going to change. And that's why we have to come together and start talking about those and how we vote on those and what our agreements are around those very areas and how we start moving those forward.
Each state is feeling this a little bit differently by way of furloughed federal workers, Senator. In your case, in Nevada, among the many furloughed are nuclear staffers, inspectors who are watching the nuclear stockpile in your state. They have, in many cases, been furloughed as well by way of the Energy Secretary. I'm curious your reaction to sending those workers home and if this is a national security problem.
So this, most people don't know, the National Nuclear Security Agency has a number of sites across the country. One of them is the Nevada site, security site, where we actually have federal workers and contract workers overseeing our nuclear stockpile and ensuring its national security, testing the stockpile, ensuring its safety, and amongst other things. Those are essential workers. They should not be furloughed, they should not be fired, and they should continue to get paid. It's essential for our national security and for so many other reasons. Again, what I saw happen just recently with this energy secretary is more of this politics, is trying to put pressure and play political games. And at the end of the day, the only people that are suffering are these federal workers and Americans. They're constantly pawns. Federal workers and federal contracts are constantly pawns and at the whims of political agendas, and it's just outrageous to me. That's the reason why I don't support shutdowns. We can still do our jobs and get things done without using a federal worker as a pawn. This is a very example of what the impact is in Nevada, and it's not just my contractors and federal workers at that test site, out at the nuclear site. It is federal workers throughout my state. It is a tourism industry that's having an impact of the bad policies from this administration. So we're seeing a downturn in tourism across the country, including in Nevada. I'm now hearing, because I follow what's happening in my state, housing is not moving as quickly as it could because there's no federal workers to do the permitting that we need. That's crazy to me. My small businesses and businesses who rely on SBA loans are not getting those loans because there's no federal workers at the SBA to do those loans. I mean, this is part of the problem why we should never have a government shutdown. We should be doing our jobs, appropriating, making sure we're moving forward, coming together to work together. And that is my frustration. That's some of the frustration I hear from colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans that are not in leadership. And that's why many of us have been talking and negotiating and trying to figure out a way out of this impasse.
Senator, just a short time ago, I do want to get to some quick foreign policy before we leave you. A short time ago, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, said to reporters outside of the White House, quote, "We are either going to announce after the close this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning a substantial pickup in Russian sanctions." Just want to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, so I sit on the banking committee. I support sanctions against Russia and have in the past and will continue to do so. I think we need to put as much pressure as we can on Russia. I support Ukraine. What is going on is outrageous, this illegal war of Putin. And we have to continue using the levers that we have here. Some of those are sanctions. In my case, in the banking committee, those are financial sanctions that we have to continue to impose. And I hope we do use all the levers we can to hold Russia and Putin accountable.
Our thanks to Senator Cortez Masto for joining us today.
And let's turn to the markets now. One of this week's most anticipated earnings just came out last hour. That's Tesla. Despite a recent sales surge, Tesla missed on earnings. That sent the stock lower in the after hours. From trading, Bloomberg Tech co-anchor Ed Ludlow is processing the earnings report from Bloomberg's San Francisco bureau. He joins us now. Ed, just not a good afternoon for Tesla.
It's not necessarily good nor bad. It just doesn't have a lot of detail in it about the future, you know, and with Tesla, that is always the story. Elon Musk wanting to keep investors looking to the horizon. A big sales surge, beating on the top line, but to be expected because they delivered almost 500,000 vehicles in the quarter gone, principally because consumers rushed before the expiry of the federal tax credit. And what Tesla's talking about in the quarter gone and looking forward is that the environment has changed for them. Tariffs are an impact to profitability. Fiscal policy is changing. It is not as supportive of EVs as once it was. They've spelled that out really clearly, and they're saying that we don't know what's going to happen. We have to react to policy accordingly. But the big overhang is the future of Tesla always, and what happens down the line with robotaxi and their ambitions in humanoid robotics.
Ed, operating expenses up 50%, as you report, underscoring the significant cost increases that automakers are dealing with. It's not just Ford and GM. What does this mean for Tesla?
Yeah, but compare and contrast. You know, General Motors, great American company, an employer of Americans, gave tangible data about the future and how they were able to navigate this environment. And investors really cheered that. Tesla's basically saying we do not know. All we can tell you is that policy has changed, tariffs are impacting us. They're not telling us what the growth outlook looks like. But remember, to Elon Musk's mind and Tesla's mind, the business of building an electric vehicle and selling it to a consumer, that is a thing of the past, and that the future for them is operating a proprietary ride-hailing service through robotaxi. The one thing I would say that is of note and interesting is look at the performance of the energy storage business, which is batteries that go into your home or in commercial scale and often tied to solar. And the growth there is far outpacing that of the consumer EV business. But policy's not helping there either. They are just dominant in that market and able to move quickly where there is demand.
So when Ed Ludlow is thinking about Tesla, does he think of it as a car company, a robotics company, an AI company?
Joe Matthew knows the answer to that question, and that is, you know, robotics and AI. Look, this is just one moment in time. It is a quarterly earnings report and call. The call has started 36 seconds ago. And the question is about November 6th, when shareholders will vote on a compensation package for Elon Musk. It is not impossible that Musk is asked about that over the course of the next hour. Within the goals the board has set for him to realize a potential $1 trillion of compensation over 10 years, he has to deliver 20 million EVs to consumers, the bread and butter business, and achieve those AI-related long-term goals. And for everyone, be you Wall Street, an everyday American, somebody in DC that looks at what Elon Musk is doing, there are many more unanswered questions about that pathway and what will happen on November 6th than we have answers to right now. So I imagine that the call will be very much about, here's what happens in the future. You should vote in favor of this comp package from Tesla's point of view.
Fascinating. I know you'll be listening for us, Ed. It's great to have you, as always. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. You can't have Tesla earnings without Ed weighing in. Thanks for being with us, as always, on Bloomberg and Balance of Power. It's been a will they or won't they back and forth for weeks as questions swirl over the potential of a Trump-Xi meeting at the upcoming APEC Summit. President Trump expecting to depart Friday. That's the plan now, as bilateral trade deals remain the top priority for the United States, with tariffs and rare earth minerals at the top of the agenda. Tonight, however, it's the South Korea-U.S. alliance that is part of our focus. More specifically, after North Korea fired ballistic missiles in advance of President Trump's summit visit. But is a potential meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un on the horizon? Our next guest doesn't think so. Joining us now, South Korean ambassador to the U.S., Kang Kyung-wha. Madam Ambassador, it's great to see you. Thank you for being with us on Bloomberg.
Of course.
There's so much we could talk about with
Yes.
a pretty wide-ranging agenda for the summit next week. We're spending so much time in America talking about whether Trump and Xi will have a productive meeting, whether they'll sit down at all, when in fact, I'm curious about your relationship with the United States and the extent to which this summit will help to codify the framework trade agreement that you've already made.
Well, we're very happy that the president will be coming to Gyeongju during the APEC Summit week. We very much expect the two presidents, my president and President Trump, to have a very productive second summit meeting. They had a wonderful first on October 25th here in Washington. So, you know, a lot of follow-up discussions have been taking place since then on both the security side and, of course, on the trade side, on the investment package. In fact, the two principal players on our part on the investment package are in town. I think they're talking still, if not, the talk is over with Mr. Ludlow, and you know, trying to nail down the remaining points of disagreement between the two sides. So lots of movement, but both on the trade side and on the security side. But the goal is for the 7 decades old alliance to move towards the future. I mean, so much has changed. The global security environment is changing, and we want to adapt and stay ahead of the challenges so that we grow the alliance into a future-oriented, comprehensive, and strategic partnership, not just on security, but economic alliance, but also on a technology alliance.
When you take the wide-eye view, what is the best outcome from APEC in terms of tariffs that so many nations have been struggling with when it comes to the United States, figuring out exactly how to get that right?
I think APEC is a year-long process. So, yes, it culminates with that summit week, next week, in fact. But there are a whole series of senior officials meetings, ministerial meetings. On the trade side, there was a meeting of the trade ministers of the 21 economies, and this included Mr. Greer from the U.S. side. And they've come up with a joint statement, I believe it was called, committing these economies to, you know, providing a trading and environment that is transparent, predictable, and business-friendly. So that discussion, I think, was a very encouraging one that, yes, as challenging as these tariff issues are at a bilateral level, there is a commitment to moving forward in a joint direction for the environment, for the ministers to make it more transparent, predictable, and friendly for businesses. So.
Speaking of being friendly for businesses, we recall what took place in September in Georgia at the Hyundai plant following the immigration raid there. Some 500 workers were detained, and this was obviously a very difficult spot for our relationship with South Korea. I don't know to what extent you helped to broker the exit at that time, but I wonder, when you consider the investment pledge that you're describing, has there been any guarantee that this will not take place again as part of this investment pledge?
The two sides have really quickly responded, both my government and our U.S. counterparts. And we've established a working group that have worked through these issues for some quick fixes, as well as some issues on the longer horizon. The working group has met once, and I think, in fact, just yesterday evening for the second time. We have clarified what can be done with a B1 visa, and the ESTA entry permit, and so what the Korean investors and the workers who come with these investments is clarity as to what they can do.
Right.
And much of the discussions have been about bringing that clarity that has now gone up on the website of the U.S. Embassy in Korea. A desk dedicated to investors and workers going to the United States will be established within the U.S. Embassy for a fast-track processing of visa requirements from these workers. So very already visible progress. Korean workers are already coming in, and we will continue these discussions. But in the longer term, for the investors, of course, they want assurances, longer-term assurances that they can send their workers and come in and do the work that's required to install, to maintain, and make sure that what's invested is up and running. Right?
Are skilled worker visas worth $100,000 for a company like Hyundai? Are you talking about that?
We're not talking about the H-1B visas. Okay. We're talking about much more short-term work visas. And I think the B-1 visa, with the clarification, will go a long way in addressing that. But we very much want, there's been a legislation in Congress for many, over 12 years now, of a specific E-4 visa quota for Korean workers coming in. That would certainly be a longer-term solution and give the assurance to the investors.
Do you think that investors will be deterred at this point until they have those assurances? Mm-hmm. Do you think it'll keep them from really wanting to put more money here?
Well, I think the commitment of my government and certainly my counterparts, both in the White House and the State Department, they are very committed. We all realize that this should not have happened. And we need to move beyond this and give the investors the assurances that they can commit to the United States. I think the government can give as much assurance as we can, and we are, and my American counterparts are doing the same. In the end, it's a business decision, and working towards a $350 billion investment package. Yes, I think they have every need and right to demand that assurance and reliability of the entry procedures and the ability to work here.
To what extent has China made overtures to your government in terms of an economic relationship, in terms of maybe finding alternatives to U.S. investment?
Well, I'm not part of the discussion on that bilateral front, but the latest news has been the announcement of their sanctions on the 5 entities of a big Korean shipbuilder in the United States. And we're seeing what the implications of this mean for that company in particular, but for the overall investment. I think it's a concern, of course. Any sanctions from any significant economic power is something to be taken very seriously. So I understand that Seoul is in discussion with Beijing about the direct implications of that. And beyond that, I mean, China is a very important partner to us economically. I mean, it's a very close neighbor geographically, and we've been building close relationship with China for decades, and we intend to continue to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ambassador Khan, it's wonderful to have you with us in our studios, and we'll be watching the APEC Summit next week, as we'll be traveling with the President, keeping tabs on those conversations. Thank you for being here this evening. South Korean Ambassador Khan with us on Balance of Power on Bloomberg. Coming up, the public outcry over the White House's demolition of the East Wing. It's still coming down. Now the Speaker of the House is now providing political cover for the President. That and more when we convene our political panel up ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for being with us. And we'll have more on the big news of the day with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte rushing to Washington when we convene our political panel up ahead. First, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will reportedly meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Friday to help reinforce the fragile U.S. brokered ceasefire with Hamas. Trips the latest in a string of high-profile visits from U.S. officials after violence flared last week in Gaza. casting doubt on the tentative peace accord. Earlier today, a top international court ruling that Israel must allow the UN relief agency to supply aid to Gaza following the latest Hamas ambush and Israeli airstrikes on the territory.
The Federal Reserve creating a revised plan that dramatically relaxes a Biden-era bank capital proposed for Wall Street's largest lenders. Some officials calculating the terms of the Fed's plan would lead to an increase of about 3 to 7% for most big banks, far lower than the 19% increase in the 2023 proposal, with lenders with bigger trading portfolios potentially seeing less of an increase or even a decrease. The Fed aims to unveil the new plan as soon as the first quarter of 2026.
And down the street, public outcry over the demolition of the White House East Wing. Yeah, look at this. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV, the demolition occurring in order to make way for President Trump's $230 million ballroom. With reports today, the president never filed plans for the new ballroom. Meantime, an historic preservation group is urging a pause on the demolition and construction as the president spends a good portion of his meeting with NATO Secretary General Rutte discussing the construction. This just happened. Drawn renderings and physical models sitting before them on the coffee table. Check this out. Still, the criticisms toward the president from both parties over this continues, so much that the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, defended the president on this. Take a listen.
President Trump's going to add the greatest improvement to the White House in the history of the building since it was originally constructed in 1800. The ballroom is going to be glorious. It's going to be used for everybody. And by the way, hey, Democrats, if you win the White House back, you get to use it too. This is for the American people, and he's using private funds to do it. How in the world could they oppose that?
Joining us now to discuss these stories this evening's political panels. Sarah Chamberlain, President CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership, is with us, and Matt Bennett, Vice President of co-founder of Third Way, our Democratic strategist. It's great to see both of you. Welcome back. Your beloved White House is coming down, it looks like, at least some of it this evening. The New York Times with an update on this. Upon further evaluation, the White House determined it was cheaper and more structurally sound to demolish the East Wing, the entire thing, to build the ballroom rather than to build an addition. Don't you have to ask permission before you start knocking the building down?
I mean, this is about number 170 on the list of things she was supposed to ask permission to do. Okay. But of course, I mean, this is insane. And doing it during a government shutdown, like they're claiming it's private money. We don't know whose money. But it is a bad look when you've got people, literally federal employees at the White House working without pay. Why are they doing this at all? Why are they doing this now?
Look at this. These are the renderings. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, we actually have the architect's designs that he's showing with the NATO Secretary General. This doesn't really apply to him.
Joe and Sarah, it was interesting, as Joe just read, that they're calling for a pause. Mm-hmm. It's done.
It's done.
Like, what do you pause? Yeah. You can't just leave the building like that.
No, of course not. And technically, he does not have to ask permission.
Yeah.
Other presidents have done changes, and they don't ask permission. It was a little bit of a surprise, certainly, to see the East Wing. But we've all been, I'm sure, in the East Wing, and we've been in that ballroom, and it is a little too small. Let's admit to that. So here we go, and it's going to be big. And there are a lot of corporations that have funded this. They were at the dinner a couple weeks ago.
We do have a sense of where this money is coming from,
right?
We do have Harold Hamm, it's Alphabet, it's Meta.
Exactly. They're doing it on free. I mean, they're happy to support it, and he's right. Democrats will be using it as well.
I think I said $250 million, right? Does the president deserve credit for having this privately funded, not using taxpayer money?
No, the president doesn't deserve any credit for this at all.
You see conflict of interest?
Yes, of course. I mean, look, I'm sure these companies thought it was a good business decision to try to, butter up the president with more money. That is what they've been doing very aggressively over the course of the last 8 months. And this is just another example of that. Also, it's going to be gross. Like, this is a Versailles-like gold ballroom. That is not what the American presidency should look like. And all the gold that he's larded into the Oval Office and along the breezeway, and the changes they made to the Rose Garden, this is not what anyone voted for.
So, Sarah, let's talk optics for a moment. I mean, you do have the shutdown optics, but let's even put that aside. Now you have the president actually showing the renderings in his office during very high-level meetings on very important foreign topics. Republicans just have to keep answering questions about this when they have enough to answer questions about with the government shutdown.
They do, but they kind of keep rolling with it. They're used to it. This is the second time he's been elected. They learned from the first time. They just keep rolling and like, okay, what's next? Maybe he could have presented the drawings in a different format. Maybe not during that meeting, but it is nice to finally get to see the drawings because most people had not seen any of the architecture. So it would be done. It has to be done during government shutdown. Bad timing, I admit. But in order to have it done during his presidency, you had to start it.
They better get going.
Right, because we don't know when this shutdown's going to end.
Well, so let's talk about that. I mean, this is the story beyond the ballroom that's captivating Washington on day 22. No off-ramps. But the conversation in the last 24 hours has evolved back to, or maybe you think devolved, to the idea of a full-year CR. John Thune suggested earlier this week that might be the only way out. You know the White House is comfortable with it. And remarkable to see Jason Smith today, who chairs the House Ways and Means Committee, fall in behind this. And he says it's not his preference, but this is probably the only way to avoid rolling shutdowns for the foreseeable future. Where's the Main Street Partnership?
So the Republican Main Street Partnership members do not want to do a one-year CR. They will if they have to, but they really want to get back to work, have the Democrats come back to work, get government open, vote on ACA, because most of the Main Street members do support an ACA fix, and then go back to what's called regular order, go back to the appropriation bills, and move the agenda forward. If we sit here with a year-long CR, I think that would be a disaster. But we may have to.
You know, we had Senator Cortez Masto on earlier. She is trying to get other Democrats to get on board and, you know, call this shutdown over. She doesn't seem to be doing very well with this at all. And she seemed to say that they can do it all at the same time. They're not doing it all at the same time.
They're not. And look, if Sarah was in charge of the House Republican Conference, I think we could solve this fairly easily. Unfortunately, Mike Johnson is in charge. And they're not, the Speaker's just not going to do that. They're not going to put an ACA fix, you know, on the table in ways that Democrats can trust in any way that it's actually going to happen. So I think we are in for a lot longer of this shutdown. I don't know what happens after the premium notices go out on November 1st. That may be a moment where the Democrats just say, look, you own this now, and open up the government.
Well, what would Chuck Schumer do with the idea of a year-long CR?
I don't know. I mean, we are in such uncharted territory. I think he thinks it's appalling also, just like the rational people in the Republican conference. But it may be the only way out of this.
Do you think the only way out of this, though, also maybe you look at November, but if holiday travel is just a mess? I mean, because that is a bipartisan issue when people are traveling.
Right. And Thanksgiving's a big holiday that people travel. I think it will be a huge problem if it's not going smoothly. They will start to complain. They will start to call their members of Congress and say, we need to fix this. Then you'll see action. I also think November 4th could be a turning point. Let's see what happens with Virginia and the Prop 50 in California, Virginia's governor's race, and New Jersey's governor's race. If the Democrats succeed in all three, I think you may see some momentum going their way. They may be like, okay, let's negotiate. And they need a victory. That could be their victory, and then they're willing to negotiate with ACA and get the government reopened. We'll
Democrats are filibustering this legislation to pay military service members and accepted federal employees, those who have been deemed essential. What's the purpose of that when so many campaign ads are going to be focused on these votes?
It's a very tough vote. But I think the Democrats' view is that is just a way around the pain of the shutdown. And the whole idea of a shutdown is to cause pain for the president. And, of course, it's horrible that our troops are going without pay. No one wants that. No Democrats want that. There's been some outrageous lies being told by Republicans about Democrats hating the troops, which is despicable and untrue. But I think inevitably pain is part of the deal when you shut the government down.
Because you know the ads are going to say Democrats voted however many, 16 times to not pay the troops. That's tough politics.
I've already written that ad. So
it's coming.
It's coming.
What time does it begin airing?
Exactly.
Okay.
Soon.
You know, this is also at a time where North Carolina today joined the states in redistricting. So when you talk about campaign ads, well, let's just talk about what the districts are going to be. Where does this end?
I have no idea, because Maryland's going to do it. Obviously, Prop 50 in California. Right now, it looks like they may be ahead a little bit. We'll have to see what the outcome is. I have no idea where this is going to end. If they can pick up a seat here and there, they're certainly going to do it. Both Republicans and Democrats. New York's going to try it. So
well, it's a lot of red.
It's a lot of red.
That we were just
There's
showing.
more red than blue.
Well, so yeah,
absolutely.
What did Democrats do with this? How do you outmaneuver Republicans on the map? Is it possible?
No, it's not possible. All we can do is try to mitigate the damage. And let's be clear about who started this. You know, this was a Trump initiative starting in Texas, and that has morphed into many other states.
Yeah.
They're putting enormous pressure on Indiana, Missouri, Florida, elsewhere. Democrats had no interest in doing any of this, but it's a requirement because we desperately need to get the branch of government back.
Do you think we'll see more of this year? I mean, do you think it just goes and goes and goes?
There are some rate limiting factors. It's very hard to do it in certain places. New York is really hard because of the laws there, but I think there's going to be a real effort to do it. Illinois is a big sticking point now between Hakeem Jeffries, who's trying to get them to do it, and some lawmakers there. Incumbents in these states do not like redistricting because they're mostly in safe districts and their districts get less safe.
Yeah. All right, we'd like to thank both of you for being with us. Sarah Chamberlain and Matt Bennett, thanks so much for this panel today. And check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
Thanks for joining us, as always, on Balance of Power. We're going to have a lot more to talk about tomorrow following the president's meeting with the NATO Secretary General, still underway in the Oval Office. And, of course, it'll be day 23, no matter what happens the rest of this evening in the Senate, of a government shutdown. I guess the question still remains, will we be eating our turkey roll when we're counting the days here?
Or waiting for a flight.
That has yet to be determined. That's right. Alongside Julie Fine, I'm Joe Matthew. We'll see you back here tomorrow on Bloomberg TV and radio.